Okay, someone tell me their favorite part about this year. Y'all didn't see that one coming.
Hava being born.
Okay.
I feel like
That's good.
that's a default answer.
What's yours?
Getting married.
And
it was
pregnant.
gonna be getting pregnant, but it wouldn't have happened if we wouldn't have got married. So
It's good. Yeah.
What's yours? I don't know.
I was gonna say that too.
You don't know?
I don't know what my favorite thing of the year was. I should have sat with that.
I know. I wanted to spring it on y'all. I had time to think about it, and that's probably either going to Disney in October or the trip I just went on.
Oh yeah,
But it's also like the most recent in my memory.
but that was your first solo trip.
Yeah,
that's huge.
It was really good. It was really good.
I actually do know my favorite thing of the year. It was being able to officiate my best friend's wedding.
That's good.
That's good. That's good.
That is good.
When you said officiate, I thought you were about to say go fishing with your dad, and I was like,
Oh, he would have loved that. That was my favorite thing, Dad.
Yeah,
going fishing with you.
Shout out to Dad. Fishing was the best.
He's gonna rope me into going all the time if I said that.
Yeah, it's real.
But maybe like twice a year.
Yeah.
that's cute.
Disclaimer.
That is cute.
Yeah. Once a year.
Okay, once a year.
I'm just kidding. On his birthday.
Wait, y'all know what's funny? When I was planning my trip, the trip was to Broken Bow, and my dad was like, "Why do you need to go out there?" And I was like, "It's like healing to be in nature." He said, "When have you ever wanted to be in nature? We ask you to go fishing all the time, and you never want to go." So there's a difference between looking at the view and sitting in a boat going fishing.
Well,
It's
the
true.
thing is, I like to go fishing. I actually do. But the problem is my dad likes to go at like 4 a.m. He's like, the fish don't bite unless you go in the morning or overnight. And I'm like, I don't care to go that bad.
I enjoy like catching a fish. Everything else, I don't want to put the worm on the hook. I don't want to take the fish off the hook. I don't want to smell like fish. Like, I just like oh, I caught a fish. I like that part.
The picture with the fish.
Yeah, the picture of the fish mostly. They haven't invited me since probably 5th grade. Duh, I don't want to go fishing in 5th grade.
It's kind of sad.
Oh, it's okay. I don't want to go now either.
She's like, nah, so I'm good.
But he was like, when have you ever wanted to be in nature? I'm like, you really don't know me because I love nature. I just don't want to fish.
That's funny.
Do you feel like, well, I know this answer, but do you feel like the solo trip gave you what you needed?
Oh, 100%. Like, even as we're about to talk through, like, just the last year, the timing of that trip was 100% needed. Had I had taken this solo trip, I mean, I literally got back like 3 days ago. Had I had taken that in May or October, it would have been great, but it wouldn't have been what I really needed. So having that at the end of the year, the timing was perfect, like 100%. So yeah, to answer your question, yeah. I can go into that more. I can like,
yeah, tell us
yeah,
more.
so
that was good.
I feel like, well, even just as we were recapping, or as we were talking about this episode, what I felt like God was asking me was like, what's been the hardest part of this year? Like, what's been the most challenging? And for me, for sure, like losing my brother in April was the most challenging thing I've ever gone through. Like, not even just for this last year, literally all 24 years of my life, that's been the hardest thing. But when I was thinking about it, the grief of that 100% has been hard. But I feel like when my brother passed away, it also opened a lot of other like cans of worms, like a lot that touched a lot of things. And so it really affected my relationship with God, because it threw me off, because at the beginning of the year, God told me, I want you to be praying like really intentionally for your brother. So in my head, I'm like, oh, God's telling me that because this is going to, like, we're going to get the victory in this.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to see him walking in freedom. We're going to see these things, right? So I spend the year praying. And so when we got into April, I remember like right when Trey died, I said to God, but you told me he was going to live. And God was like, I didn't tell you that. And I was like, oh, you didn't? And I thought back and I'm like, yeah, actually you didn't. And I knew Trey was going to experience freedom. I thought Trey was going to experience freedom on this side of eternity. Like, I thought Trey was going to experience freedom and I was going to get to see it and like walk life out with him. And so God never lied to me. God never showed me something that didn't happen. He's experiencing the best level of healing and freedom. But, you know, when you're walking that out, you don't feel that. Like, you're not, you know, very conscious of that. So anyway, it caused I had a lot of beef with God. Like, I felt betrayed by God. And so as I continued to go through this year and just riding the wave really of grief, that feeling continued and bubbled up more and deepened. And I would go through like spurts of like bringing these emotions to God, working through them, and then feeling like I'm at a good place with God again. And then I would just fall again. And there was really a lot of things when I was thinking about it this morning. I was like, the theme of this year in my head, like on the negative side, was like, this is not how I thought things were going to look. And so there was a lot of things in my life that as we continued the journey and not only walking through grief, it felt like there was these other areas that I thought God was going to show up in, and it feels like he didn't. And so fast forward to December, going into this year, I don't want to cry. Going into December, I felt like everything that I thought God was going to do, I was like, you're not. And you don't care. Like, you don't care about me and you don't care about my future. And I hit this point of feeling like I know at some point I knew at some point I'd hit a valley season. I knew at some point I would quote unquote suffer. But I thought when I was in that, you would be with me, and you're not with me. And I strongly 100% believe that. And I started December so angry at God. And I've felt anger towards God before through this whole journey, but this was different. And I told my pastor, I was like, I don't want to talk to God. I don't want to be God's friend. I don't even know if I want to do this anymore. Like, and that scared me. There was a part of me that was scared of that, because I was like, I've never felt that way before. I've had so many emotions towards God, but I've processed them, and now I don't want to process them. Like, I don't think I want to do this anymore. And I was talking to my counselor about it, and I've never experienced depression until this month. I experienced like a lot of hopelessness of just like, I told my counselor, what's the point if everything dies? Like, that was my viewpoint. Everything dies. So what's the point of doing all this? What's the point of showing up? And I was in this headspace of, it's not that I wanted to die, but I just wanted to disappear. And there would be times where the pain felt so painful that like dying felt like the only way to escape it. But I wasn't in a headspace of like, oh, I want to die. I just was like, I need to get so far from everything. And so I told my counselor that 2 weeks ago. I was like, I just want to disappear. Like, I don't want to be here, but not in the sense of I want to die, but just, I don't want to be here. I don't want anyone to need me. I don't want to talk to anyone. Like, I just want to disappear. And, she was like, well, why can't you just disappear? And I was like,
What?
You're not
like, I'm paying you not to say those things.
You can't say that, actually. And she was like, I think there are times where we want to escape something and like there's a negative connotation behind it, but sometimes you actually just need a break. Like, you just need some time away. And she was like, I want to challenge you to go on a trip by yourself. And I was like, I can't do that. And I started thinking of all the reasons why I can't. And then I knew, though, that's exactly what I need to do. And she was like, I want you to go on this trip, but I want you, she was like, you are God's friend and you do love God. I know that about you. And I want you to rediscover, like, I want you to find that again. And I was like, oh, I don't want to do that. Because I was really disappointed with God. At that time, I hadn't read my Bible or like really talked to God in like a week. Now, I know that maybe to some people that's like, oh, that's not that bad. But when you go from like, it'd be like me
every
talking
day.
to y'all every day in constant communication. We're always talking. If we're not talking, we're texting. Like, that was me and God. And so being in, that was just 1 week of like physically, but mentally I was checked out for probably about a month with God. And So on the way to the trip, I was like, I'm not listening to worship music. I'm not going to, like, I was really avoidant. And then when I got there, I was like, well, I'm literally here for you. So, and I just, my environment changed, but nothing else changed. Like, I put the same stuff. God was like, just do what you've always done with me. Like, let's just do what's familiar. Mm-hmm. And so I had like my worship playlist playing, and I was just praying. And God told me, I want you to go to John 11, which I already knew the verse, because when Trey passed away, God took me to John chapter 11. And that's the story of Lazarus' death and kind of Mary and Martha's process through it. And so I'm reading the story, and I'm like, God, I know this story. Like, I've already studied this. What does it matter? And I was telling him, like, I'm so mad at you. Like, I'm so disappointed in you. I thought things would have looked different. I thought, like, why am I feeling this? And you're nowhere to be found. How can the two be, like, connected? How can I feel such pain and you're also present? The two cannot exist at the same time, which I know that's not true. But in the moment, you're just mad. And so I was like, I feel like I'm talking so much. I'm sorry. But anyway, so.
Do not apologize.
Yeah. So I start reading the story, and I felt like God tell me, like, read it out loud. And I'm reading out loud in this cabin by myself in the middle of the woods. And I just am bawling because I'm realizing, like, I've never so connected to a story. And I'm reading about Mary, and when it starts, John chapter 11, when it's talking about Lazarus, it talks about Mary and Martha and how Mary was the one who would soon worship at Jesus' feet, right? Mm-hmm. When it introduces the story, it talks about that. And then it goes on, we see Jesus come to the gate. They had called him earlier, right? And he comes late, and so Lazarus ends up dying. And they're like, what the heck? Like, if you would have been here, my brother wouldn't have died. And I was like, wow, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. And I had that revelation back in April. So I'm like, God, what's the point of me reading this story? And so I had always noticed Martha's perspective. When Jesus arrived, Martha leaves the house and she goes and talks to Jesus. And she has this honest conversation, and he tells her, like, do you believe? And she's like, yeah, I know you can do, like, anything if you ask God. She's not thinking he's about to go, raise Lazarus. But I'd always noticed Martha's faith and all that, right? And I was like, I want to be like Martha. Well, now I'm in a season where I'm reading this, and I actually resonate a lot more with Mary, because when Jesus comes to the house, Mary stays in the house. And I was like, dang, like, I've been staying in the house. You're right at the gate, and I have not left the house. And Martha comes in the house, and she's like, hey, he wants to talk to you. And Mary immediately gets up, and she goes to the gate. And, frick. The first thing I notice is Jesus doesn't leave the house. He stays at the gate, and he waits for Mary to come. Mary comes to the gate, and she's just sobbing. And the word says she falls at his feet, and she's sobbing, and she says, if you would have been here, my brother wouldn't have died. And the word says that as Mary's sobbing at his feet, that he was deeply troubled by it. And that's when you see Jesus wept, right? Mm-hmm. And as I was reading this, I'm thinking about how Mary and Martha are true friends of Jesus. And I think about if one of you came to my feet, right, and you're just bawling, I would immediately be moved by it. I wouldn't be able to sit in the room and not cry with you. And as I'm reading this story, the song Communion is playing by Maverick City Music. And this song is about friendship with God. And I was thinking of my own words, like, I don't want to be God's friend. And in that moment, I was like, gosh, I'm Mary. Like, I've been sitting in the house, so angry with you. And you've been patiently waiting for me to come out of the house. And when I do, I can sob at your feet, and you don't scold me. You don't tell me your faith should look better than this. You shouldn't be feeling this. You actually weep with me. And this whole year, I've been wondering, where are you in my suffering? And you've actually been here the whole time. So I was like, dang, God, you've been here the whole time, haven't you? And as that song was playing, it starts saying, like, here's where the dead things come back to living. I feel my heart beating again. Yes. And I was like, gosh, like, life without God feels equivalent to being dead. Mm-hmm. And that's how I felt, like, I've been dead without you. And I was just crying, like, I miss you. I miss your presence, but you never left. Like, I'm the one who left. And so I was just crying, and I'm like, I feel my heart beating again. Like, and so it was just this beautiful moment with God. And it was such a perspective change for me, because I really left that time knowing you really are Emmanuel. You really are God with us. Yes. And when you're walking through difficulty and you're walking through suffering, I think the biggest lie that the enemy wants you to believe is that God can't be with you in this. And so, I fell into that. And you think,
or that God is the reason for this.
Yes, God caused you this pain, and he doesn't even care enough to walk with you in it. And so when I'm reading about Mary, I was like, may my heart be like Mary, because she has a very, her posture is the same in both moments. Yes. That she's the same woman who would sob at your feet in the midst of her disappointment, in the midst of her pain, in the midst of not even seeing the miracle yet. But in John chapter 12, she would also be the same woman to come to your feet and express worship in the most beautiful way. The posture is, I'm going to be at Jesus' feet no matter what. Mm-hmm. And so I left knowing the truth about God, but I also left knowing, may I be like Mary, yes. That in the midst of my pain, that is worship. To sob at your feet is worship. And on the flip end of that, to come to you when I've seen the miracle, to come to you when I've seen the things, that is worship too. And both are this radical expression of worship, which kind of leads me into just what God spoke, my word for the year being praise. And I could talk there's so many layers to that. But specifically with this story, I want my heart to be like Mary. And he spoke to me, Psalm 34:1, I believe. I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise will continually be in my mouth. And that's exactly what I want this year to look like. I've spent this last year so angry with God, so disappointed in God, and really just unsure. It's not even I was cursing God, but I had nothing nice to say about God, and I had nothing nice to think about God. And so I felt this challenge of it doesn't matter what you give me. It doesn't matter what you take away. It doesn't matter what I lose. It doesn't matter what emotions, high or low, that I experience. You're always worthy of my praise. It's not limited to any season. And so 2024, I would say that was the most difficult part, but it's led me to truly some of the most beautiful moments I've had with God. And I think that's relationship with God, right? If I don't love you, if I don't care about you, I don't really take offense to these things, or I don't need to dig into the disappointment or dig into but I think that's the reality of relationship with God, is there are real emotions involved. There are real feelings involved. And the same way, if you did something, I love you enough that I would want to sit with you through the pain. And I love that God is so relational that he does that with us. And so, the grief has been very difficult. That's its own journey, but it's really opened up a new level and depth and pain in my relationship with God.
Thinking of your word serve for 2024, as you're talking, it's I feel even a new level of serve this year, your service to the Lord. And you have been faithful this whole time. For you to go 1 week without it, okay, great. There's a lot of people that would have just said bye and gone months, but you've been so faithful, still leaning in, still reading your Bible. You're still serving him. And it's when he gave you that word, at first when we were all kind of okay, what does that mean? We were yeah, you're going to serve the Lord, duh. But now, after seeing all that you've walked through and how you've got back to that position at his feet, it's another level of service to him. That's so good.
I think probably once a month this year, I'm God, what the heck does serve mean? I legit. And even this morning, I was I probably won't touch on that because I don't feel I fully know what the point of that word was. But I kind of mentioned to y'all a couple of weeks ago, I really do think it was that. Mm-hmm. What does it look like to serve God when it feels like your life is hell? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because, I think that is the perfect time to tap out. And there has been so much temptation to tap out. Legit, if I didn't have the people in my life, that are in my life, I would have been gone about 6 months ago. And so, yeah, God all year has been saying this word to me, stay. Like, stay the course, stay with me. Can you stay with me even when it doesn't look like I'm anywhere near? And it's been truly the most challenging thing ever. And I think in general, like, a constant struggle I have is not wanting God for what he can give me, like not wanting God just for the promise, but just wanting his presence. And that has been challenged a lot. And I realize every time I hit rock bottom, because there's been a few times this year where I really hit like what I thought would be my lowest. It always somehow gets lower, but every time I've hit rock bottom, I come to the conclusion, I really do not want to do this life without you. I could care less. Like, whatever I have to grieve, whatever I have to lose, I really can't live without you. Like, this is hell without you. Like, it is so miserable without you. And I think when you think about the idea of serve, I think that plays perfectly. Like, it actually doesn't matter what you can give me. It actually doesn't matter how great my life looks. Like, my life is yours. And like, whatever you want to do, wherever valley we have to go, like, I'm not going to walk away from you. I might take a few days. I might be gone for a week, but like, I'm coming back, you know?
That's so good.
I love how you mentioned that your priorities needed to be straightened out a little bit, and how it's easy to walk away when you put a promise over God, or there's a little bit more temptations. And my word this year was patience. And I was like wholly devoted to the Lord. I was like, whatever you ask me to do, I'll do it. I really feel like I walked in obedience pretty much the whole year. I was believing for big things, praying the bold prayers. My life is very much up in the air of a lot of decisions to make, and I was expecting a lot to move and God to come through for me in December. And when December came, I didn't see much shift, and I was so disappointed, so discouraged, and I honestly just felt like I must have heard God wrong. And this whole year of believing for what I was believing for, this whole year of sacrificing, all the things that I did for the Lord were just, not to say a waste, but misguided, because I heard him wrong. And so I really just felt like God didn't come through for me, God failed me, and that I couldn't trust him. And instead of going on a trip like Ciarra did, I fell into a temptation, and that temptation crushed me. I was like, I don't care anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to live this life where it's all about faith. I just want to do whatever I want to do. I want some sort of comfort. And during the holidays, I felt so lonely, and I was just like, anything to escape, but I wanted something to bring me comfort. But because I felt like God disappointed me, and because I felt like I heard him wrong, I was kind of going through the motions with him. So I was showing up for my quiet time, but I wasn't allowing his words to sink into my heart. So even when I read his word, it wasn't going into my soul to believe as truth. I was just like, these are just words. Yeah. And he would give me affirmation, and I would be like, I'm just making that up. And so I was just in a really low, and I fell into this temptation that I had overcome years ago, and it hit me harder than normal, because at this point I should know better. And after I fell, the next morning, I had time to sleep on it, all the things. I woke up, and my heart was so grieved for the sin. And I felt like I just ruined everything God had for me. And because this sin, no matter how small it is, because with me, I want to do everything the Lord asked me to do. So even if you mess up even the slightest, it just felt like I just ruined his whole plan for my life. And even with this sin been between us, I felt so far from God. And I was like, this pain is worse than the waiting. This pain is worse than not having anything you said that you were going to give me. And I realized that, again, my priorities were out of alignment. I didn't realize that I had put a timeline on when God can come through for me, or he isn't good. And so I had put the promise above God, and so I just didn't trust him anymore. And in that moment of grieving the sin, I was like, I'm so sorry, God, that I forgot that you were the prize, that I forgot that you could do nothing for me, and you've already done more for me by dying on the cross for me and saving me. And as I was sitting in that, I was like, I'm such a terrible person. I don't deserve anything. And he reminded me of Genesis chapter 3. And I'm just going to read it because I think it's so powerful to read straight from the word. It says, now the serpent was more cunning than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said to the woman, has God indeed said, you shall not eat of every tree of the garden? So in other words, the serpent's literally like, did God really say he would do X, Y, Z, whatever he's promised you? And the woman literally repeats to the serpent exactly what God told her. Yeah, God said, don't eat that. And then the serpent comes back at her and deceives her again. And this time she falls into it. She falls into the deception. And she eats the fruit that she wasn't supposed to eat. And it says in verse 7, then the eyes of both of them were open, and they knew they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves coverings. And they heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God among the trees of the garden. And I love in verse 9, it says, then the Lord called to Adam and said to him, where are you? And when I read that in the midst of feeling like I had failed God, like I wasn't good enough anymore, like I don't deserve anything he has for me. I don't even deserve to be in his presence. I love that it says the Lord called out to Adam, where are you? Yeah. And so even when we mess up, God still pursues us. He still wants to speak with us. And if you skip to verse 21, it says, God, I can't see. Also, for Adam and his wife, the Lord God made tunics of skin and he clothed them. And that was the first time in the Bible that blood was mentioned in the Bible. And God, he had to sacrifice these innocent animals to clothe them so that they wouldn't have to stay in their shame. And I remember talking to Ciarra about this, and I was like, I know God forgives me. I know his blood is sufficient for me. I know his grace is sufficient for me. Yada, yada, yada. We know this, right? Yeah. But I was like, I'm not going to feel better for a couple weeks or for a month or so when I'm back on track. And I was like, God's like, that is a work-based mindset. That is not how it works. And if you remember back in verse 7, it says they did sew fig leaves. They didn't actually need God to clothe him if it worked in our own effort. They needed God to clothe them, and they needed a sacrifice. And as I was sitting in that, it just made me so much more thankful as I looked to the Lord, as I looked to Jesus on the cross, that his blood was so sufficient for me that it could cover the sins. Yes, I knew better. I directly disobeyed you. I shouldn't have done it. But you're still good enough to cover my sin. And he clothed me with righteousness. So I'm still in right standing with God, even though I fell. And I was sitting in that, and I was like, God, I don't deserve anything from you. You can't give me the promise anymore. And he said, if you remember the verse, it's the wages of sin are death. And we are all sinners. So if you really think about it, we don't deserve anything anyway. Yeah. It wasn't because of my good works that he was going to give me these promises that he had for me. It was because he's inherently good. And he's like, I'm still the good father. Yeah. And my timing is still perfect. And I love what Hailey told me. She said, you are not big enough to ruin God's plan for your life. And then she shot me with my with my verse, God works all things out together for good. And I was sitting in that, and God said, does your patience have an expiration date? And I was like, ouch.
So
I thought that was a 2020 forward.
yeah, and that ends.
I know. Gosh, apparently it's carrying over. No, I'm kidding. But as I was sitting in that, if you would have asked me a few weeks ago, does my patience have an expiration date? I would have been like, probably, honestly. Like,
Yeah.
I'm done waiting. I'm tired of waiting. I honestly thought my life would look a lot different by now. And as I'm sitting in that, in having just disobeyed God and having sinned, I realized, no, my patience does not have an expiration date, because being in the valley with you is far better than being on any mountaintop without you. Like, I literally cannot survive if I don't have you. And I said, okay, God, my patience doesn't expire, but how I am struggling, like truly I'm struggling. How do I wait on what you promised? How do I wait for you to provide? How do I wait for you to come through and fulfill the promises that you spoke? When I'm so tired of waiting, when I'm losing hope. And he said, gratitude. And he said, your word for 2025 is gratitude. And the thing about gratitude is you're remembering the goodness of God from the past. And you're remembering intentionally his goodness in your present. And it's not just, I'm doing the Bible recap, and I love what Hailey said. She's like, gratitude isn't just, oh, God's so good. I mean, that's nice, but specifically, why is God good? You're teaching your heart to knit together with his, and it's drawing you closer. And the example she gave was with food. You're not like, oh, just thank you for this food. No, you're like, God, thank you that you gave me taste buds. Thank you that you gave us food that tastes good, that we get to enjoy the food. It doesn't just nourish my body. You could have gave us no taste buds. We could have just been eating dole food just for nourishment.
Legit.
But we get taste buds. Like, how wonderful are you that you love us so much that you want to give us that pleasure. And when you're so intentional with that gratitude, it compels you to be obedient for the future, because you know the Lord is good. You know he is faithful. It's constantly reminding yourself of his character. And that is where I missed it. I forgot, or I started questioning who God was. At some part on the inside of me, I didn't fully believe his character. And that only can come from spending time with the Lord, not going through the motions, but truly, who are you? Who are you to me? What am I believing you for? And reminding myself of the past, that he is good.
That's strong. I think, I feel like even hearing both of us, like hearing you say those things out loud, I think a lot of what I'm seeing, there's a pattern that a lot of the challenge that we face is linked to forgetting who God is. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really cool, because now, even just thinking about praise, gratitude, and what the words that y'all will get into too, it really is that constant reminder of who God is. Mm-hmm. And I think that is the easiest thing when you're facing difficulty. The temptation is to forget his goodness, to forget his kindness, to forget. And so I think it's just so interesting, like both of our words and all of our words, it's a complete emphasis on God and God alone. Mm-hmm. Like, it's actually has nothing to do with me. Mm-hmm. It's all about you and who you are. And I think I'm just excited for us to go into 2025 with such a clear view and such a deep like intention and expectancy, not for, we want to be expectant for what God can do, but like, I just want to see you clearly. I just want to know you more. Like, you deserve my praise.
Yeah. Well, even like your word, you have to have him to sustain you to see the fulfillment of that word. Mm-hmm. And I think the one thing that I've kind of been trying to meditate on more is that God really isn't human, that he can lie. Yeah. That when he promises, he really does fulfill. And I think he's so, well, It's funny because I have a new appreciation for his patience for me. I was like, you've been trying to teach me patience all year, which there's been so many good things with that, truly. But in the same, I'm learning his patience. Yeah. And I'm like, thank God that you have way more patience than me.
Yeah, that's so good.
That's so good because I feel like mine was kind of opposite of, well, the hardest part for me this year. I was thinking, I was like, when we were sitting with it, I was like, oh, the hardest part has been my marriage. And when I was sitting with that, I was like, that's not actually true. Like the underneath the surface part of that for me has been control. Like this year has been the hardest year, like even harder than going through divorce, all these things. And when I got the word refinement, I remember my pastor was like, I don't see refinement as like this big trial that you're going to go through. Like, cause I was like, I'm ready, Lord, whatever you have, like, I'm ready. And he was like, I don't see refinement as this big trial that you're going to walk through, more so it being a continuation of things that are going to be stripped from you. And I was like, that actually sounds better. Like, I was like, that sounds good. And I didn't realize the extent of what that would be. And so, like I said at the beginning, getting married has been the greatest thing that has happened to me this year. But it's also been one of the hardest things I've ever walked through. And there's been so many good moments of getting pregnant and getting our first home and all of these things. But with that, there's been the layers that have been really hard of getting pregnant at the same time my husband loses his job. And our son moving home with us and it feeling like the hardest transition and him starting school. And there's just been, with every good thing, it has felt like a constant of like the hardest wave of hard just smacking us in the face. And what it's been is this constant pull from me and the Lord of every time I give you something or you give me something good, I have to take it back into my hands because it's hard. Like it's hard to give you the control when if I do it, I can be safe, I thought. So for me, every time that I've been met with hard in my head, I was like, God, if I just had my hands on it and I control it, then this wouldn't happen. Like his behavior would be great. Our marriage would be great. Pregnancy wouldn't be this hard. All these things. And I remember our pastor said, you never get to a certain point that you're above receiving prayer. Mm-hmm. And that's where I had hit was, I can do this on my own. I'm voicing it to people. I'm walking it out. I don't need prayer. And I remember just getting to a point where both my husband and my son were so fearful of me just because of how controlling I had become. It was impacting every aspect of my life, and I'm still currently walking through that. But I just realized, like, I need this broken off of me. And I went to somebody who prayed over me, and she was like, what it was for me was this realization of it wasn't that I really wanted control, it was a lack of power I felt I had. And I remember realizing that all of my life, I have felt this, like I had no choice to say yes or no to the things I went through. I didn't get to pick if mom and dad got divorced. I didn't get to pick if dad left. I didn't get to pick being exposed to same sex at a young age and falling into it. I didn't get to pick. And it was this continuation in my life of powerless that I thought if I take the power back and control everything, nothing can happen to my family, to my son, to my unborn baby. Mm-hmm. And it was like this light bulb went off in my head of like, this feeling of powerlessness has made me this controlling. I really have been like a dictator walking around my house, and that feels so embarrassing to say because I would go into ministry, I would be around my friends, and my family would experience somebody so different. And I eventually told my husband, like, and it's the same with you. It's not that I wanted to physically die, but the thoughts became so consuming that I was like, if I wasn't here, even if I just went a week, maybe things would be better. Like, maybe if we didn't get pregnant, we'd be more happy. All these things kept coming up that I realized it was still my ability of trying to control. If I could control the timing when this happened, when it didn't happen, then things would be better. And I remember coming to God and being like, how do I make it stop? Like, how do I make the heaviness of how I feel just stop? And he was like, rejoice. And I was like, that doesn't make sense. So try again. But as I'm listening to y'all, I think I'm just so moved because God's answer hasn't been to do something more. It's been for you to focus on me. And I remember during my divorce, I read out Isaiah really heavily. I studied it out for a year. And God brought me to Isaiah 61, verse 3. And it says, to give them beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, and the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness. And as I was rereading this, I realized I wrote a year ago when I was not with my husband. I wrote, this is my first Christmas alone. My first Christmas, just you and I. And what I realized is God was like, I've always been in control. And I'm trying to get you back to a place of when you hand it to me, the heaviness is replaced with rejoicing, yes, with praise, with lightness. And I think for me, I'm still walking through it. Like, even just being here with our boy for 2 weeks straight, not being in school, it's been hard for me to not want to control every single thing. But what I'm realizing with God is, even in y'all's words, and as we've talked about our words, is that God wants to get back to a place of not receiving with the expectation that I'm going to get something, but receiving just because when I am filled with God and I am filled with His Word and His Spirit, I'm a better mother, I'm a better wife, I'm a better friend. And what I saw this year was that the moments that I was lacking in that, I was this monstrous of a person. And it's okay for me to say that because I can recognize it, that like I am unrecognizable, and I have been. And as hard as these things have been to walk through and to experience and to feel and to almost like realize this is my life and this is happening to me, and I'm the one that I have a choice to either ask God to help me out of it or stay in it. Like, I eventually came to my husband and I was like, I just need you to check on me because I've had just such dark thoughts. And that's what I realized, like, even as you were reading, when we go away from the presence of God and we hide in this shame, it allows the enemy to come in and start voicing those things of, God made you pregnant, and it also is the worst time. Like, your husband just lost his job, and look what God gave you. Like, just to think the goodness of God was being outweighed by the voice of the enemy of, if God was so good and He was a perfect God and an on-time God, He wouldn't have burdened you with all these things that are weighing you down. And so, walking into 2025, I recognize that the posture of rejoicing that's not where I am right now. And I keep trying, like I keep doing already. And I realize every time that I do it, how it shifts. And even listening to y'all, I'm realizing that that's the whole point that God wants to get to, is Him focused and less of me.
It's so funny that you say all of what you said, because I feel like for me this year, my word for 2024 was release. And it was very much the same things of like, releasing, I would say probably the hardest thing this year for me is releasing the expectation of what I thought things would look like. I'm going to be like the one bad person on the internet to say that, like, sometimes you have a rainbow baby and it sucks. Like, it's really hard. And that feels awful to say because I love my daughter more than anything in the world. But you pray for something and you want it to come, and then it does, and it's hard, you know? And it's like, it's kind of the same, I feel like, for all of us. Like, you're praying and you're waiting for something, and you have this expectation in your mind of like how it's going to be. And it's just not that at all. Like, for months, I was going on minimal sleep, waking up multiple times, which is to be expected with a newborn, of course. Like, I was prepared for that. I just don't think I was prepared for how hard that would be, having a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. And so, and being home with them all day, and then starting to homeschool my son when he turned 5. Like, I think this year has been a low year, but not for like any one thing for me. It's just been hard, and it has been a lot of release. And I started the beginning of this year writing every week in my notes on my phone. I had an alarm set. What did you release? And so I would sit down and I would just type it quickly on my phone, like certain things I would release. So one week it was an offense I had with someone. I was just like, I'm offended, but I'm going to release it because that's what God told me to do. One week it was releasing I really wanted to go on the year-end trip with one college, and I just didn't feel like I could do that with the way Hava was not sleeping, and I didn't want to leave Colby to handle that by himself. He could have. The man is a beast, but I just wouldn't have wanted to do that to him, and that was hard because that was something I really wanted to do. And a lot of it was just releasing things back to the Lord, like, okay, you gave me this opportunity, and here's this, like, releasing, but it's this expectation that I had isn't met. And so then I start to, like, I feel so strongly like how you were saying, and even you, Tara, like becoming someone that you don't like. Like, this year I'm like, I don't even know who I am anymore. Like, I'm so afraid. I was so afraid of having a third child and completely losing myself. And this sounds so bad. I feel like with my mom, I'm one of 3 children, and I just remember after my brother was born, I was 6, and I felt like things were hard for a season. And my mom had a lot of other things going on in her life, like a lot of things I thankfully don't have to deal with, but there was always a fear in the back of my mind that if I have a third kid, like, I'm just gonna kind of lose myself. And that could be a narrative I've been telling myself my whole life, so it's almost played out this year, but also I feel like this fear that I've had, I've given the enemy a voice to that. And it's something that I'm like trying so hard to break out of. But when you feel like you're in survival mode for like months on end, and like I was even thinking this morning, like I texted Tara this a few weeks ago, but I was like, I'm so sorry I wasn't there for you. Like, I don't feel like I've been there for her the way I wanted to be. And like, even with Ciarra, like the day we go to breakfast for her to celebrate her engagement, I go into freaking labor. Like, and I'm just like, God, I just want to be there for my friends, and I can't even show up for them. But I'm also like, I'm not even able to show up for myself in my own marriage right now. Like, I'm like barely getting by. I've got nothing left for anyone else. And so I've had to release a lot of that, like this expectation that I've put on myself and on the Lord this year. And I feel, if I'm being honest, like I feel like I'm still struggling with releasing that. I don't feel like I've got victory over that yet. So we'll see how it goes into 2025. Yeah, we got like 3 more days for me to figure that out. But I always start praying for my next word like super early. So in November this year, I sat down. It was early November, and I was just kind of like, okay, God, I feel like I'm releasing, and I know that this isn't something like with any of my words. It's never been like, oh, I'm done, like I'm released, or like I've done this thing, check the block, okay, next year. Like it's been a continuation of all of these things. And so I'm like in this releasing, like I don't know what else to do. Like, and it is that control. I'm giving up that control over how I thought things were going to look and how I wanted life to be. And like, I in my head, I'm like, if I could just sit down and schedule everything, then nothing would be messed up. Like if I could just take a break for like 2 days and go and like create a schedule and create a morning routine and evening routine and like a checklist and reminders on my phone to go off every day so that I'm like doing all the things, like then my life would be better. And God was like, there's only one thing that matters, and that's me, and that's worshiping me. And so I felt like he was telling me like for this next year, it's everyday worship. And so it's this idea of like, I can worship him in everything that I'm doing. I can worship him in the moments, which I have a lot, honestly. I've sang more worship songs this last year than I cared to admit, because I'm just like, in the moments when I'm the most upset, I know it shifts things. And with Hava, like there's a lot of times it would calm her down, and I know she's going to be a little worshiper, and I know the enemy wanted nothing more than to ruin the bond between her and I, because I know that there's something really, really special about her. And so when it comes to praising the Lord, it's almost like it's more costly when you're doing it when you don't want to, you know, like, but it almost feels like there's a greater reward for it. And so, yeah, I feel like I'm sitting here like I'm still in it. I'm like not, I don't know when I'll be out of it, but I'm like,
I feel like there's, it's funny because we know each other so well, but sitting in this environment and hearing all of us talk, the last week I've been wondering, why do we have such similar words? Why do we have such similar words? God, what are you trying to say? Like, what are you trying to say?
Yeah.
And I realized
none of us have discussed.
No, we haven't had this conversation
Mm-mm.
yet. And I'm realizing we all fight the temptation to control.
Mm-hmm.
And I think ours looks a lot more similar and y'all's looks a lot more similar given our seasons. But when I think of each story, we all were disappointed with how we thought things should have looked.
Mm-hmm.
We're all planners, which is so rare to find in a friend group. We're all planners. And when I was thinking about control really is pride.
Yep.
It's saying, I could be Lord of my life better.
I could do this.
So yeah, what better word than worship? Because worship literally has you taking your eyes off of everything else and looking to the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually think it's really beautiful because it reminds me why community is so necessary.
Yeah.
And we really, truly couldn't have dug each other out of the struggles that we faced. We can't dig each other out of our need to control. But I think it's beautiful that we can look together at the Lord, and that's actually what gets me from that place. But it's really cool that we get to do it together. And so I'm just thankful, like gratitude.
Yeah.
But I'm thankful that I'm rejoicing, I'm praising. This is everyday worship in action. But truly, I'm thankful, Lord, because I know how similar we are, and we're all so different. But I think it's really cool for God to do that this year. Like, I'm going to get my girls. Like, I'm getting their eyes turned towards me. And yeah, it's a decision we have to make, and we have to make that decision every day. But I'm really thankful that we're getting to walk this out together. And with that too, as we were all talking, I also kept noticing the shame that we've all felt.
Yeah.
Even Hailey, when you were like, this is so bad. Like, even if you didn't say you felt shame, like, even
No,
just
it's
all of
verbiage.
us. Yeah,
So
I'm like,
shame.
between
Yeah.
takes, I've been like, I'm so sorry. Why did I say, like, and they're like, stop, that's, and
Yeah.
I'm realizing there's a lot of shame. And I'm just like, I just want us to talk through that. Cause I realistically, I think when people reflect on the year, yes, there's a lot of joy. There's a lot of gratitude. There's a lot of, high moments. But I think that's a familiar feeling of shame. And maybe it's not even just shame of like, who have I become? Or shame of why didn't I handle that better? Or shame.
I should know better.
Yes, there's.
I should have done more.
I should have. That's what I was going to say. There's also the shame of I was supposed to complete XYZ and I didn't. I was supposed. I mean, even when I think of my year, I'm like, man, I wish I would have done more of this. I wish, like there's no grace for myself.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I just want to dialogue around that.
I feel like when we step into the new year, there's this idea that like that was a chapter and it's closing, and it feels like this time is running out. I didn't get to do what I wanted to do. I wasn't who I wanted to be. I didn't hit the mark in the areas I wanted. But the reality of it is it's just a continuation. And I think the shame comes from that chapter is over and I can't go back. I can't
That's so good.
I can't redo. I can't be a better mom. But the reality of it is I feel like, I was a terrible mom to him this year. But his school year, our life is still continuing with each other. Yeah. And I think the shame comes from the timeline of just like you touched on earlier.
Well, and I'll say even when I was going through my stuff, God was like, your plan failed, but my plan is still thriving. It's still going. I'm still on plan A. I'm still working out all the little details. And you want to make sure that everything is in alignment. If I gave it to you right now, I wouldn't be ready. Or maybe you wouldn't be ready. Yeah. But with the shame aspect, the thing about when like I was talking about how the tendency is to want to work your way back into God's favor, or even in your own heart of like, oh, I'm a good person or whatever it may be. The blood truly does cover you, but that doesn't stop the enemy, the accuser, from accusing you of it. And so you have to physically be like, no, look to the cross. Like that was paid in full. Like I know I did a bad thing, but I'm not a bad person.
Yeah,
right.
That's good. I think, it's not attaching it to your identity. Yeah. And you touched on something that I'd never consciously experienced until walking through grief. And both my pastor and a friend of mine who kind of mentors me, they were like, why do you keep grading yourself? And I was like, what do you mean? They're like, you had a hard week and you're like, I suck. But then when you have a good day in grief, you're like, yeah, I'm doing good right now, right? And I was like, I realized in that moment, it's not that I even compare myself to other people and that brings shame. It's that I'm comparing myself to older versions of me.
Right.
Yesterday I was doing really good, so I got an A+ for yesterday. But today I feel depressed and I feel hopeless. Okay, that's an F, right? And my pastor was like, there's no grading system. There's no metric. And I think with shame, it's like you were saying, December 31st, like that, the test isn't due. Like there's nothing to turn in. I think it's smart to have goals. I think it's smart to have even like endpoints or, like whatever. I think in a way that is smart to have. I think it's smart to go into the next year with the word, but that I think because we go into it, because we go into the next year with a new word, we automatically think, well, whatever happened back there is shut and closed. No, actually, I still have to work through serve. I'm still working through discontentment. That was my word years ago. I'm still working through solitude. Yeah, this year was intentionally for that, and I learned a lot about that, but it didn't end on December 31st. I'm still bringing those practices with me. I'm still, you know what I mean?
So good.
Well, it's like building blocks too. Like I've noticed even with patience, like my last word was discipline and trust. You have to have trust in order to be patient. Yes. You have to have discipline in order to be patient. And this gratitude word literally goes the next building block from it. So you never just leave your word.
You never really fully achieve
like
anything.
Like,
it's sanctification.
Yeah.
Like you always say, because when I have this baby, I'm going to be refined even more. And so it's not that you, it ends. It's just a continuation of building.
When you had said I guess I didn't realize the December thing. Duh. Like, that makes so much sense about it feels like time is running out. Because I literally told you that like 2 days ago. I was like, I was so in my head that the time is out. Like, I am running out of time. It's over. And the Lord literally told me like a month ago, time isn't running out. It's running down. It's not like a clock ticking. It's a timer coming down to what I have for you. So there's an appointed time that you'll get the things I have for you.
So
and if you really believe God has perfect timing, then the clock is running down. The timer's running down.
I want to end, if we're ending, I don't know, we might stay a little longer, but a question I have for us is, what's something today, what day is it? So my watch is about to die. Okay.
28th.
December 28th. What do you know to be true about God? Like, give me one statement. I mean, expound on it. But, like, what do you know to be true about God today? And that's something that you want to bring into this next year. Like, as we've talked through the lessons and the challenges, what do you know to be true about God that maybe through this year has been a struggle to remember as truth?
For me, for sure, it has been that he never leaves us nor forsakes us, because I have found myself in moments where I have felt the most forsaken in my life. Yeah. And when I have gotten on my knees and I have been to the lowest of lows, I have somehow stood up even taller, even more strengthened. And it wasn't because I prayed hard enough, long enough, worshiped loud. It wasn't because Ciarra did anything. It was because I was able to almost wipe the fog off my lens and be able to see that you're right here. Mm-hmm. Like, you're right here on the ground with me, and you're up there with me when we're having the best week ever. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I know God to be true, that he never leaves. He's omnipresent, just like you said, Emmanuel, God with us all the time. That's not just in seasons and high tops and valleys. That's in constant. And for me, that awareness of you never leave me, it's the freedom to try again. Even when I'll have moments, God so gently is like, we can try again. I'm going to give you another opportunity. And it's not this, well, you messed up today. That's a yellow face for the day. We'll try again tomorrow. It's you have an opportunity in a second to try again, to be a better mom, to speak kinder, to be more gentle, and all these things. And so for me, I know his character to be that he is always with me, because this year more than anything, when I've wanted to drive my car off the road or kick my husband out the house or send my son to boot camp, I have realized that when I stop looking at all the things and I look to him, he's like, I'm right there with you in it. You're not by yourself. I'm not asking you to control the things. I'm not asking you to figure it out or be a perfect mom or perfect wife. I'm just asking you to invite me along in it. And in that, I'll never leave you or forsake you in it.
That's so good. I feel like for me, it's that he can handle it. Mm-hmm. And like nothing I do is going to push him away. There was a lot of times this year that I was telling God how awful I thought he was. And for the sake of not having this as an X-rated podcast, I'll keep my words to myself. But I would straight up, I'd cuss God out in the middle of the night, and I'm driving in laps around country roads trying to put my baby to sleep. Like, this is what you give me? This is the rainbow after the storm? This is the freaking storm? This is a tornado! I would just like lose it on God. And I even had a friend of mine text me the other day, like, I just cussed at God. And I was like, this is how I think of it. If I love my husband more than anyone in this whole world, and I have been and said very mean things to him, but it's because he's the closest one to me. And I think if you're not in a place where you can really, truly tell God how you feel, like, I'm disappointed in you.
And it's not even that you think it's justified.
Yeah.
It's just
it's not right.
Relationship. Yeah, we know it's not right.
Yeah, it's not. It's not. I'm not saying, like, go tell God how much you hate him. Like, probably don't do that. But if that's how you're feeling in the moment, he can handle it. And I feel like in those moments when I've felt so broken and so angry with God and my circumstances and just been able to get it all out, like I feel like he's always met me with grace and he can always handle it. And he's always reminding me, like, y'all, it's like the amount of times I've had people tell me, like, God is so proud of you this year. In the year that I would be the least proud of myself, it's like he can handle it. Like he's always there and he can take it. Like he's powerful and he wants to hear those things. He wants that relationship even when it isn't pretty, looking like me highlighting in my Bible and telling people the goodness of God or worshiping him. Like it's me
it's not
literally
real.
screaming at him in the middle of the night.
And I think that's why, like, this book is so important too, because we have so many stories. Oh, sorry.
People,
Like what book?
the Bible, the holy word of
Like
God.
we think about Job, who lost everything, and him telling Satan, like, you can take everything from him because I know he still won't turn his back. And so it's like God gives us all of these references, and I think I think sometimes, God, you didn't think about 2024. You've never experienced this before. And you look and they're walking through the exact same things that we walk through today. And God gives us a blueprint of not only how to walk it out and how to not walk it out, but how he's revealed in every part of the stories that we see, of how he never leaves and how he's there present and how, like you said, he can handle it. Like just how he lets Job talk crazy to him, and then he's like, "You done?"
Yeah.
He's like,
"No.
like,
you asking me some questions."
Yeah. And so it's like it's proof of that. Like God is not afraid of the things that we want to ask, the feelings we bring. He's not shocked by it or surprised. Like even thinking of like you this year, God wasn't surprised that you were gone or away. Like he's like, I knew this would happen, and I also knew this trip would happen, and you would find me again. Yeah. And so I think that's just the beauty of God.
Those are so good. I would say mine is he who began a good work is faithful to complete it.
Yes.
And so if it's not good, he's not done.
Yeah. Yes, that's so good.
Yeah.
Drop the mic. Thank y'all for coming. Okay, Tara, what's yours?
Right, so
I've been sitting here like, gosh, there's so many things. I think one that is like very fresh, that he's a good father and a kind friend. And I think it's cool that both can exist, like how God can be, and they're like, you shouldn't be, if you're a parent, you shouldn't be their friend. I think you should. I think sometimes, but I think God is really good at being a good father, which highlights his provision, and his kindness and,
His care and control.
Yeah, his care and compassion. And that then leads me to trust. I think that's a big thing that I walked through this year. And I'm still walking through. Mm-hmm. Even having gone on the trip and even having had this mountaintop moment with God, each day as I've been further from that trip, I'm constantly questioning, can I still trust you? Mm-hmm. Can I still trust that the things that I know you spoke, do I trust that I heard you correctly? Mm-hmm. Do I trust my ability to hear you? Do I trust that you will fulfill those? And do I trust that your timing is perfect? And so when I think of him as good father, that comes with a lot of trust. And I think that's, I'm leaving this year knowing he is a good father. The activation is, can I trust him? Mm-hmm. And then kind friend, I think what we're saying, right, is like, if we really view this as relationship, what does relationship require? Honesty. Mm-hmm. And it's so easy to do this journey with God and put a mask on, and act like everything is fine and go to church and do the things and work your job and act like your relationship with God is thriving when it's literally not, and it's in the dumps. And I've learned this year, God is not afraid of my humanity, that God is a kind friend, that knows how to have healthy communication, that knows how to receive the blows, that is more than okay to sit here while I'm like literally hitting him like he's a punching bag and going off about how I thought you would have done this and why does it look this way, and God's not surprised by it. Like you said, God can handle it. But even more so, a kind friend doesn't let you stay there. And there have been countless times I've sat with y'all and I've said things and I've done things, but we don't get off the floor and keep that mindset. It's like, okay, but what do we know to be true about God? What do we know to be true about this situation? Or maybe I can't even get the words out, but y'all can reignite my faith. And I think that's what's so beautiful about God is every time I've come to him sobbing in a journal, every time I've come to his feet angry and disappointed and just sad, like every time I've just sat with him in my sorrow, I get up from the table and I feel a little bit lighter. I get up from the table and I'm reminded it sucks right now, but I know that you're good. And I love that you brought up Job, because there's a line where he says, like, yeah, even though you afflict me, I will trust you. And I think when I think of this year, I didn't know suffering until this year. But even though I feel like this affliction has literally come from you at times, I still can trust you. And it's a daily decision. It's a hourly decision to trust you. But I'm going to trust like your characters, what I know to be true about your character, that you're good, that you're kind, that you're trustworthy, that you're faithful. So I don't have one sentence. I have a lot. But yeah.
I love how you were talking about just being like honest with your emotions and how God met you in those emotions every time. And I'll say that throughout the year, I've had moments where I was like, I'm done doing this. I don't think I can do it any longer. But I went to the Lord that time, and I wasn't so riddled with discouragement and disappointment that I was able to be honest with myself of how I felt with the Lord. And in those moments, he renewed my strength. And the time that I did fall into the temptation, it's because I wasn't honest with myself about how I was feeling. So I couldn't even be honest with God about how I was feeling. And so the thing I really do want to leave you guys with is exactly what you were saying, that God can handle it. And so bring actually what you feel. Allow yourself to sit with your emotions and with your feelings, because they're not always true, but they are valid. And so allow God to remind you of the truth.
That is good.
It literally, like, thinking back to that story with Lazarus and Mary and Martha, when Jesus shows up and they're like, thank God you're here. Oh, I love you. You know, they're like, no, if you had been here, like, my brother wouldn't have died.
But they were friends with him.
They were friends. And that is true honesty. And I think where we get caught up is we just, no, it's okay, I'll sweep it under the rug. The rug is getting real thick. And now you're gonna trip over the rug. And I think God, like, honors our honesty and honors, like, because one time, this was several years ago, my pastor told me, like, the only way to truly heal is to allow yourself to feel. And you keep thinking, if I put this in the closet and shut the door, that I don't have to deal with it. I don't have to process it. I mean, even walking through grief, I spent the first few months in shock, yes, but also just, I'm not going to deal with this. Like, I don't want to feel sad emotions. God, can you just give me the next thing so I can be happy again? And
the one thing about that closet is when you open it.
That what? Yeah, and you open the closet, boom, it's all right there. It doesn't, putting it under the rug does not make it go away. And nobody likes to feel sad emotions. No one likes to sit in their anger. No one likes to sit in their bitterness or their unforgiveness. Even a couple of days ago in counseling, I was like, there's been this box that I'm just not wanting to touch. And I realize I'm about to flip a freaking table because I won't open this box, and I'm feeling a lot of anger. And my counselor is like, let's pull the box out, you know? But realistically, we think we're doing God a favor. We think we're doing ourselves a favor. No, you're not.
There's so much freedom when you finally deal with it.
There is. And I know, like, I'm talking about it lightly and playfully, but truthfully, I know how hard it is. Like, I know it really does suck sometimes to touch those things. I mean, like, there's been a lot of times this year that I've fallen into temptation, and I feel like I'm running to God with my tail in between my legs, you know, and you don't want to acknowledge it. You don't want to tell your accountability. When I've been sad, I don't want to voice, like, I want to disappear. Okay, what's that going to do to my friends? How is that, you know, like, and at the end of the day, I realized, like, actually, God honors my honesty.
Well, it goes back to Ashley at the beginning, like when God says, "Where are you?"
Yes.
In the footnote says, like it's a father calling out. He already knew.
Yeah.
And it's the same with us. God already knows.
Yes.
He's waiting for the response from us of where are you? And it's the coming that God's waiting for.
Yeah.
Well, and it's the acknowledgement of where we are.
Yeah.
Like, you can't just pretend to not be where you are. Like, the only way through it is through it. Like, you have to face it. And if you don't, I feel like it's interesting because there are going to be events that I don't want to say like trigger, because I feel like that's so like cliche right now in today's society, but like things that you don't deal with have a way of coming back up if you don't deal with them. And so then it's going to seem like it's expounded later because you didn't take the time to sit with it the first time through, you know?
I'll even say, though, sometimes those things happen and it's a new layer of healing that you're going through.
Yeah.
I love that you said acknowledging it, because I also think when you acknowledge the reality of your emotions, you're also acknowledging how much you need God. And I've realized that every time I feel like I've hit a low, I realize I am desperate for you.
Right.
Like, I know you're in the room. I know your presence is immediately here. Like, I know that is true, but even still, I'm desperate. Like, there's a psalm where it's like a deer like panting and longing for like water, and like when you hit that moment of like just real emotions, you're like, I'm actually like, I need you. And then not in the like, oh, I need you, Lord. Like, no, I'm like on the floor. I desperately like, I need you. And I think that's what our humanity does. We need our God. Like, we need a savior. And I think to acknowledge your human emotions is to acknowledge, I can't be God or Lord over my own life. I need you.
Well, the church does a great job of making sure our spirit's good, but we still have like the soul aspect of us. And so even in Psalms 139, when it's talking about you knit me together in my mother's womb, it says at the end of that passage, wonderfully and fearfully made, marvelous are your works, and that my soul knows it very well. Meaning there's the truth, but there's also the layer of like, you need to meditate on that so that your soul also knows it.
Yeah.
That's strong.
That is really strong.
She just literally drops stuff in there.
Okay,
Stuff
so
just
we're
be
just-
brewing in her head.
I'm sorry.
Nothing was brewing.
She's like, whose head? Yours.
She's like,
I was speaking.
Yeah, that was
oh
the
man. Well, what an episode.
Yeah.
We're back.
We were talking and I was like, dang, I think we've told them, like, we started the year really, really vulnerable with one another, and we are for real ending it with a lot of vulnerability with each other, and it feels easy with y'all, but it's a little bit harder with y'all. So.
Be nice.
No.
I'm like, please don't.
But I think that's something that as we move just forward with this podcast, that the layers of vulnerability are only going to continue to get deeper.
We're really trying to follow the Lord and the Holy Spirit's lead on what He wants us to speak about, stuff that we're actively going through, because yes, we could talk about certain topics and plan a whole perfect podcast, but there's
that's our podcast, not God's podcast.
Yeah, so we really just want to follow what the Lord is leading, and so we're not always gonna have a
Next week's
clear,
episode,
a clear theme for next week.
we don't know. Is what
We'll let you know when we know.
Yeah. So basically, what Ashley is saying is we are prayerfully considering what's next for this season.
That's perfect.
And we don't know. We thought we thought season 3 was going to start on December 10th, and it is December 28th. Yeah, and we're sitting here with not a release episode. So we just want to be honest with y'all.
God said, your plan is cute.
Yeah. God's like, controls.
He's like, release. Remember, release.
Timing.
Yeah, he's teaching us
He
a lot.
said patience.
Yeah, truly. Just kidding. Gosh.
Hey, you triggered me. No, I'm just kidding.
She's triggered. We need a safe space.
Oh
Somebody help us.
We'll unpack that next episode.
Yeah.
No, but truly, we just want y'all to know we don't know what's
We don't know.
And maybe that's hurting us more than anybody else.
Yeah, they're like, we don't really care, fam.
They're like, we don't care.
I was gonna say, no one cares.
Yeah, no one cares. But yeah, we just want y'all to know we don't know what's next. And but we do know that it's going to require a lot of vulnerability. And I think we're going to be, this is just me speaking, I think we're going to be sharing on a lot more than we ever thought we would. So stay tuned.
We can't wait to see you in 2 weeks.
Yeah. What if it's not 2 weeks?
Maybe.
We don't know.
We can't wait to see you again.
We'll see you again.
Lord.
We know we're still in it.
Yeah.
Podcast isn't ending.
Yeah.
Just don't know when she's coming back. All right. We love y'all.
Love y'all. That was unhinged.
Cut to the music.
I think it's better unhinged.